Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron saying, this week is Parshas Parah, where we read about the Parah Adumah as the additional kriya of the four special kriyas that we have, and we're going to be reading about the Parah Adumah with the second Sefer Torah that we're going to take up. So we're going to read what it says. This is the statute of the Torah. Hashem commanded, saying, "You shall take for yourself a red towel." Do you can always say Nesienu, it's known the questions of Arabeim, the Tzarech Lav, we can understand. Why is Parah Adumah distinct and different from all other karbanas? Because the Parah Adumah is distinct by the fact that it's made and burnt on the outside of the Beis Hamikdash, outside the Mishkan. Not like the way of all the other karbanos that are made specifically inside. The place that Hashem chose. And you cannot compare it to by Yom Kippur. We had two seirim, two goats. One, there was a girdle between them. There was a lottery between them. One of them was offered inside the Beis Hamikdash, and one was sent outside Le'eretz Gzeiret, to be thrown off a cliff, and so on. So over there, we find that so we also find another thing that is brought outside. So he says, because the goat that was sent outside was called for the Azazel, it wasn't a carbon for Hashem. Carbon, as opposed to the Parah Adumah, the red heifer, was called a carbon. Like it's brought down in Tanya that the Torah called it chatos. So therefore, chatos, the fact that we call Parah Adumah chatos indicates as a term that's used for one of the types of karbanas. There's a carbon oila, there's a carbon shlamim, there's a carbon chatos. And we find that the Torah calls the Parah Adumah chatos. That means the Parah Adumah is a carbon. So therefore, the question is that Parah Adumah is unique in the fact that it's the only carbon that's brought outside of the Beis Hamikdash. That's one question. We can understand another question. We find in Parah Adumah an unbelievable thing. Specifically by the Parah Adumah to say, this is the statute, this is the law of the Torah. It's seemingly not the law of the entire Torah. There's other statutes that are called, for example, by Pesach, it says, Chukas HaPesach. That is the statute of the Pesach, not the statute of the Torah. The fact that we call it a chayk, this is not such a novelty. This is not something unique in the mitzvah of Parah Adumah, the term chukah. As it's known, there are three types of mitzvahs. Eidos chukim mishpatim, those mitzvahs that are testimonial mitzvahs, celebratory, ceremonial mitzvahs, those mitzvahs that are called chukim, and then there's those mitzvahs that are mishpatim, civil laws, rational laws. Chukim are super rational laws. So the fact that we say that the entire Torah mitzvahs is divided into three kinds, eidos chukim mishpatim, so that means that there are other mitzvahs, not just the Parah Adumah is called a chayk, other mitzvahs are also called chukim. There are many mitzvahs that are included in the category called chukim. Especially in the innermost aspect of things. In other words, looking at things from a chassidus pnimis Hatorah perspective, kol ha-mitzvahs heim b'bchinas chukim, that all the laws, all the mitzvahs are in the way of a chayk. He's soon going to explain why. But before he explains why all mitzvahs, even mishpatim mitzvahs and even eidos mitzvahs are really super rational mitzvahs, before he explains that, he's going to say an additional thing, noisef al zeh, shegam b'pashtas keinu b'protei ha-mitzvahs. That's so, in addition to the fact that it's not even according to Pnimius HaTorah, not even according to the deep part of the Torah, but the Rambam actually says that the details of the mitzvahs are chukim. So, for example, even though we might have a mitzvah of, let's say, Pesach, it goes in the category of eidos, but specifically why we do certain details of Pesach in a certain way, in a certain aspect, in a certain a manner that's called a chayk. Or, for example, let's say we have a mitzvah of mezuzah. Mitzvah mezuzah is seemingly a logical mitzvah, or mitzvah of edus that we're testifying that the home is the Eibishter's and so on. But why does the ink have to be black? Why can't the ink be pink ink? Why does it have to be parchment? Why does it have to be in a certain particular place and position and so on? So the details of the mitzvahs are always in a way of chukim. So in addition to that, there is the way all mitzvahs, looking at it from the inner perspective, all mitzvahs fall into the category of chukim. Before begins a Kodesh Hakodoshim, it's explained in Tanya and in many other places in Chassidus, the Gamma mitzvahs, Yeshalem Tam, even those mitzvahs that do have a reason for them, Ein Zatama moving Lanu Levade, Taxa Tam Kulu. This reason that is understood to us is not the ultimate explanation. In it is enclosed the inner component that's beyond intellect and understanding. Hainu, this means the noise shakim kol mitzvahs sarach liis boivin shel chuka loy mitzvah tam vas gula chulashu mitzvahs. In addition to the fact that the way we're supposed to fulfill a mitzvah has to be in a way of just kabbalas oil. It has to be in a way that we are fulfilling it like a servant fulfills his command of his master, of his king, not because of a particular reason that we understand, and not because of some unique properties that the mitzvah has. Nusach brachas called mitzvahs, like the language is in the bracha that we make on all the mitzvahs. Asher kidshanu b'mitzvah so b'tzivanu, that he sanctified us in his mitzvahs and he commanded us. In other words, we have to fulfill it as a command, not as a something that we understand or something that's logical and so on. In addition to the fact that that is from our perspective, that the way we have to fulfill a mitzvah has to be in a way that we're doing it because we were commanded, not because of the reason. In addition to that is the Gam HaMitzvahs Atzvam, also the mitzvahs themselves, Gam Elu Shesh Leim Tam, even those mitzvahs that have a reason, Hein Lamayla Ma'aseichel V'Avona, they are beyond intellect and understanding, because what we do understand that the mitzvahs is only that aspect of the mitzvahs that the Eibishter brought down to our world that we should be able to understand it. But in truth, it's not really possible for us to truly be able to understand the mitzvahs, because really it's coming from Hashem, and everything from Hashem is really beyond understanding and beyond our appreciation. Therefore, since it's beyond our understanding, beyond our appreciation, so we must say that the mitzvahs really are something that are essentially, all the mitzvahs are beyond understanding. Nimsa comes out as Parah Adumah, the fact that Parah Adumah is called a super rational mitzvah, a chayik, that's not such a novel thing. That's not it's such a big, great type of idea. So Amnam Tzarech Lahavim, but still in all we need to understand. And this is the question that he started asking before he went off on this whole thing about how all the mitzvahs are really chukim. Why does it say this is the chukah of the Torah? Though the mitzvah is only one of the 248 positive commandments, Mikol Makim, despite the fact of being one of 248, but Dafkin Nemar Zois Chukas Hatorah, only by the mitzvah Parah Adumah does it say this is the chukah of the Torah. The emphasis on the word Torah, the entire Torah. Seemingly, it's not the law of the Torah, it's one of the 248 laws of the Torah. The Rebbe adds another thing. It's also known one of the meanings, one in the word chukas, the way it is supposed to run, the way it's supposed to go. According to as it comes out, what is the phrase? This is the chukah of the Torah mean? The way how the order is and the content of the mitzvah of the Parah Adumah, that is the order and the content of the entire Torah, including also the mitzvahs of the Torah, as we will explain. Like will be explained later on. The detailed halachas of Parah Adumah, how their content is similar to the entire Torah. It's our love when you understand Mao in Parah Adumah, what's the idea of the Parah Adumah? Because of that, it's distinct and different than all the mitzvahs of the Torah. What is it about Parah Adumah that it is considered the order and the content of the entire Torah? And you know the idea behind this is mitzvahs Parah Adumah in Yanahu mitzvah Teshuva. What is the idea of mitzvahs Parah Adumah? It corresponds and it symbolizes the mitzvah of Teshuva. Because of that, though it's only one of the mitzvahs of Torah, it's distinct from all the other Torah and its mitzvahs. Therefore, the preparation of the parah, the burning of it, and mixing of it, etc., was outside of the base of meat. Because the idea of Parah Adumah is the mitzvah of Teshuva. Like it says concerning Teshuva, it says the term in Shir Hashirim, I will find you outside. Because the idea of Teshuva is it's a service in matters that are outside the boundary of Kedusha, that the person that does Teshuva, he is elevating, like we'll soon say, things that are outside of the entire category and realm of holiness. As opposed to all the other matters of Torah and its mitzvahs, that the idea is internal service because we are doing, we are being involved in matters of holiness. Now the Rebbe says in the brackets, seemingly we're not really dealing with holiness. We're dealing with things that are like in a neutral place, and we'll bring it to holiness. No, the avoid is to make permitted matters into a mitzvah. So you take an animal hide and you turn it into a parchment for a mezuzah, for example, or Sefer Torah. The goal of it is to bring matters that are permitted that were outside internally. Not the avodah should be in a place that's outside. The command and the emphasis is that the avodah have to be outside because we're dealing with things that are outside the realm of Kedusha, the idea of repairing a sin, like we're about to explain. The idea of Teshuva is repairing sin. Like it says, they shall confess their sins that they did. The pasuk does not leave a simple meaning. That what it says, their sins, it's referring to the literal idea of a sin, not just the way Chassidus explains chait from the word chisaron, that was deficient and lacking, but literal sin. Just like it's very obvious, that only when you're dealing with a literal sin does one bring a korban. Along with the korban has to be teshuva and has to be the mitzvah of confessing one's sin. What is the idea behind this? Sin comes from the three totally Talmudic klippas. They're not just outside of the boundary of holiness. They're even outside of a so-called neutral place, a place between kedusha and impurity. Klippas noiga. Klippas noiga is also a klippa, but it's not as far out as gimel klipsat meis as the three completely impure klippas. Therefore, therefore, also the service of Teshuva, which is to repair and to fix up those things that are completely outside of the realm of Kedusha, these things that are Averis, these things are in the three impure klippas. So that is the avodah of the outside. It's not contradictory to what's explained in many places. The main idea of Teshuva is to accomplish and to be the idea of to return the age that gave it. Was just the opposite. Specifically through Teshuva on sins, does one reach the true idea of the spirit returning to Hashem. The movement, Mashin is Barlel, it's understood from what the Rebbe explained in the previous time. Shadafka, the Abira Mata Mata Yoser, specifically and particularly through refining the most lowest place. Magim, Lagivay, Gavay, Yoser, so does one reach to the most highest place. So too, it's in our situation, through the Teshuva for a simple literal meaning of a sin, Mata Mata B'Yosef, that which is very low. Magim le'elakim asher nesana, we reach to the elakim that gave it gavoya b'yosef, very very high. This is the idea. Ma she'amrazal Chazal said b'makom shebal tshuva endim ein tzadikim g'morim yichayim lamed by a place where bal tshuva stand. So complete tzadikim can't even stand over there. Afal picha tzadikim g'morim av davidasim b'shleimus v'bir klubas noik. Though the complete tzadikim did their service perfectly. In a complete manner, in refining klipas noigam, through refining and elevating permitted matter, and not only do they refine klipas noiga, but tzaddikim also have a capability of refining the gimel klipsat meis, gimel klipsat meis by control the chiyah b'kim kama, and also they're refining the three totally Talmudic clippers and the way of pushing it away, like it's explained in many places. In other words, the tzaddik, one who did not engage with bad whatsoever, he refines the gimel klipsat meis, he refines the totally bad clippers through disengaging, through pushing it away. So he has a complete avodah. He deals with refining klippas noigan, he deals with refining gimel klipsat meis. The Kalmak still in all, even Shabbat Shuvah Poel Habir des Doines Hamat Mata B'Yosef, since Shabbat Shuvah affect the refinement of the intentional sins, that which is very very low. L'chein K'Shaydei Shuvah Shleimas Doines Naslik Yizachis. Therefore, when he does a complete Shuvah, and therefore his intentional sins become for him like mitzvahs, Mevur B'Ger Shuvah, like explained in Tanya in the Ger Shuvah. Magil Dargan Niles B'Yosef Shalomailam Madregis Tzadikim Gmur. He reaches a much higher level. That's higher than the level of complete tzaddikim. To such a degree is he higher that he's incomparably so. So we say complete tzaddikim can't even stand over there. Like to explain at length in Rama Michas Teshuva how the Baal Teshuva is so much higher than tzaddik. Now getting back to our topic of the Parah Adumah. The Parah Adumah, which is the idea of Teshuva, like it says, the Parah Adumah came to atone for the sin of the golden calf. And also the Parah Adumah has to do with coming in contact with a dead body. That idea of death has to do with Gimel Klipsat Meis and is a result of sin. This will be understood also why the Parah Adumah, all of its actions were outside of the Beis HaMikdash, yet there's one thing that was not outside. The sprinkling of that Parah Adumah mixture with water and so on upon the person of his tummy was within the confines of the area. It was meaning it had to be facing towards the oil moed. Why is that so? Through doing Teshuva for intentional sins. In the simple sense, in the literal sense, which is outside of the boundary of Kedusha, one reaches the inner level. The pnim, till the most inner of inner levels, like we said before, that the spirit will return that the Eibishter gave it. This is similar to the avodah that was on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippurim shaykh leParah Adumah. Yom Kippur is connected with Parah Adumah, moving Midrash Razal, like it's understood from Midrash of Chazal, Shemedam and Chukad Yom Kippurim, Chukad the Parah Adumah, that they compare the law of Yom Kippur to the law of Parah Adumah. V'chein echod zeh Kohen Gadol ha'eved avodas Yom Kippurim. Both the Kohen Gadol that does the avodah of Yom Kippur, echod zeh Kohen hasoidef es ha'parah, the Kohen that has to, his job is to burn up the Parah Adumah, mazen all of them, efer ha'parah. We sprinkle upon both of them. The Kohen Gadol that will do the avodah and the Kohen Gadol that burns up the Parah Adumah, they have to sprinkle on him from the ashes of the Parah Adumah, the prior one. Like it's brought down in the Rambam that we have this as a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu, though it doesn't say it openly in the Torah. So we see this association between Yom Kippur and Parah Adumah. And now he's going to explain the concept behind it, that the main service of the day on Yom Kippur, Achas Bashana, once a year, Kodesh Hakodoshim was the service of bringing the incense offering in the Holy of Holies. Specifically and only through the offering of the incense offering. The that it was made had in it 11 spices, and the spices were Shukaneged Yudalf Kisrin Misavusa. They corresponded to the 11 crowns of impurity. Including also the chelbina, which is a bad smelling spice. So the idea was, it indicated you have something bad and negative. You have the 11 crowns of klippa, and you're transforming it. Meaning, it's just like Teshuva, the transformation of the negative to the positive. The klippa to kedusha. Through these 11 spices was the transformation and the refinement of the klippa. One could reach the most innermost chambers to the level of the once a year in the Holy of Holies. Similar to that level that we spoke about in Parah Adumah, that one sprinkles towards the oil might. In Parah Adumah, there's an additional advantage over the service that was done by the incense offering on Yom Kippur. That the making preparation of the Parah Adumah was specifically outside. In Parah Adumah, we see in a revealed way and in an emphasized way that's about the idea of Teshuva. That's also what's brought down Medrash concerning the Parah Adumah, atoning for the sin of the egel. That says, let the cow come and atone for the actions of the calf. The mitzvah of Parah Adumah was to atone for the sin of the golden calf. The sin of the golden calf is the root of all sins. That followed Matan Torah. This is like we said before. The Parah Adumah in Yano, we not sure that Parah Adumah is the idea of repentance and for sins that which the egel represents all sins. But would this also be understood why it says this is the chuk of the Torah, the Mavur, of the Torah that's explained, the Torah, the Koil, it's referring to that aspect of Torah, that's idea of engraving. The power and capability for the idea of Teshuva on the literal sense of sins, that comes from the three totally Talmudic eclipses. It comes specifically from a place that's so deep that it's considered engraved, as we'll soon explain. Yuvin behagnu abir madis medrash has been understood by first prefacing to explain what's brought on the medrash. Tamli Moshe, that Moshe said, "Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the universe, im nitmazeh, if a person became such a type of tumah, in other words, the tumah involving a dead body, what will be his? How will he become purified?" At that time, Moshe's face became darkened, turned colors. Once he reached the Torah portion of Parah Adumah, he was like relieved. That's known, the question about this, the possession from the fact that Moshe's face turned colors and became darkened. It's obvious Moshe Rabbeinu thought that someone that becomes defiled by a contact with a dead body, he thought that there's no way of purification for it. And the question is, what makes you say this? The Maish not Tumas Meis Mishar Tumas. Why would Moshe Rabbeinu think that the impurity through contact with a dead body is different than any other impurities. Just like any other type of defilement and impurity, there is a means to become purified. So also when it comes with the impurity of a dead body, of being in contact with a dead body, it should also be the same. So why did Moshe Rabbeinu think that all of a sudden when it comes to contact with a dead body, that the situation is hopeless until he learned the halachas of Parah Adumah? And you know, the idea behind this is the Parah Adumah bolatar gamma mata mata b'yoser, because the Parah Adumah comes to purify also that which is very, very low, Avi Avois Tumah, which is known, the grandfather of Tumah, the father of all fathers of Tumah. It's the idea, like we said before, there's 3 impure klippas that are even lower than klippas noiga. And even amongst the 3 impure klippas itself, it was the lowest, that there's nothing lower than it. Therefore, Moshe's face changed colors. From the perspective of Moshe, the level of Chacham of Kedusha, and there's no capability to refine the 3 impure klippas. The level of Moshe is Chacham of Kedusha. Like it's explained in the commentary on the Zohar of the Alter Rebbe, that when it says in Kabbalah that through Chachma things can be refined and elevated, it's refining and taking the good out from the bad and fruit out of waste product, or it's refining waste and taking that away from the food. That's only refinement alone. But to purify someone who became impure through contact with a dead body, this is indicative in the spiritual realms of falling very, very low, much lower than klibas noiga. For that, you need to transform the impure to pure. That's what you're doing with the person. He had become impure. He had become defiled. And that person you are transforming into purity. It's not like refinement, which Chacham understands refinement. The Chacham is beriru. Chacham could refine. But here it's transformation. You cannot draw this down from Chachma. That's why the face of Moshe changed colors, and he couldn't appreciate, he couldn't understand how such a person of such a low state of impurity could be refined and could be purified. Through the Parah Adumah, there's also the refinement in the 3 totally impure klippas. That it's in its capability to transform the impure to pure. That Medrash brings down, that's the idea that it says in the pasuk, who will give and make the pure come out of the impure. That transforms the impure to the pure. That's the idea of the Parah Adumah. And because through the Parah Adumah comes down higher than Chachma, because Chachma itself, the level of Moshe, cannot understand and appreciate such a level. From the level of Chukas, as we will explain further on, the level of engraving the Torah, that the chikika of Torah, something that's engraved, when you engrave something, so then it's part of the item that's engraved. It's not something additional. And then that's the highest level of Torah. The highest level of Torah is the way it's something that's engraved in godliness. Afterwards, it comes down in the written Torah, where it's already not engraved. There's ink on parchment. Writing on parchment are 2 separate things that are joined. And there's a lower level. And afterwards, it comes down also into the oral Torah, which is even lower. The Inyan Asfiris, in the Sfiris, the level of the engraving of the Torah, where the Parah Adumah comes from, That is the level of the concealed level of intellect of Arich Ampin. That's the lower level of Keser, the intellect of the lower level of Keser. Juinin Chachma Shebekeser, it's Chachma Bekeser. Ulamayli Yoser, in truth, the level of Chakika of Torah, the engraved part of Torah, that's even higher than that. Zel Mashakosov Kodesh Marzok Bigas Kodesh being Kiddush Mechatos. That's the Alter Rebbe writes concerning the sanctification of the Chatos waters. That's what it's called. That when you prepare the Parah Adumah and you mix it with the ashes of the Parah Adumah with the water, that's called the Kiddush, the sanctification of the Chatos liquid. After the Alter Rebbe said, quote, that it's the level of the Parah Adumah water is Chachmei Law, and the concealed level of intellect of Arich Ampin, that about it says that with Chacham becomes refined. Moisif Oid, he adds over there in that Igeres HaKodesh, it becomes transformed the darkness to light. Is that that is the main advantage of this concealed level of intellect, the lower level of Keser. That through the Mechstima of Keser, through that lower level of Keser becomes not just the refinement of the good and bad of Noiga, also happens and occurs through this, the transformation of darkness to light, that even intentional sins becomes like mitzvahs. Since the root of the mitzvah part is from such a level, therefore it would atone and elevate also that which is very, very low. The intentional sins of the three impure klippas, that's lower than klippas noiga. That it reaches up to a level of maila zachias, even higher and higher than zachias. The Rebbe doesn't explain how, but there's another place he says, nasa like his zachias. They are like mitzvahs. So when you say like, that means as, such as, compared to, that could mean less than or more than. The Rebbe teaches over here that the intentional sins becomes transformed to such a high level that it's only like mitzvahs because it's even higher than mitzvahs. Similar to that, the service of Yom Kippur, then it comes down that Hashem says, I have forgiven as you have stated. What does it mean? Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, I have forgiven as you have said, because the Eibishter said, I forgave like your request was that I should forgive. That's what it says on Hashem spoke to Moshe. This is the chuk of the Torah that Hashem commanded. The mitzvah of Parah, the mitzvah of Parah is to be made outside. It's about refining the three evil clippers. That's also what is brought down in the Sefer HaMitzvahs of the Rambam. That Hashem commanded us to make the Parah Adumah, so that its ashes should be ready to whoever needs it, for the purification of the impurity of in contact with a dead body. Like it says in the Torah of it will be for safekeeping for the congregation of the Bnei Yisrael. So the Rebbe explains these words of the Rambam, the Hainush, the entire idea of the service of the Parah, is to be ready to purify the one who finds himself very, very low. That he became defiled through the grandfather of all tumas. To elevate it to the most highest level. And the power for this is from a level that's higher than Chachma. That's the reason why it says over here twice Havaya. By Dabar Havaya Moshe and then Zoyskok Hatorah Shetziv Havaya. Yedua, like it's known, the Cholmot Mishanim Shem Havaya based on a pasuk echad. Whenever it is found twice, the name Yud Kei Vav in one pasuk, Hapirishu, the meaning is the Shem Arishan Hu Bazah. The first time when it says the name is in Zeir Ampin. Va'beis, and the second time where it says Shemi Kevavke, Uba'arech Ampin is in the lower level of Keser, known as Arech Ampin, Ulamayla Yosr Ba'atik, and even higher in the inner level of Keser, known as Atik. Shoyrish Hamshach, the mitzvah is Parah Adumah, because the root of that which is being brought down of the mitzvah of Parah Adumah, who me'avaya the Atik, is from the level of Yud Kevavke of Atik, the inner level of Keser. Misham Nimsha B'chiras Chachma, and from there it comes down to the level of Chachma Leimer, to say. What does it mean to say? To transmit it further and further, to come down very much below in the place of the grandfather of all Tumah, to transform it mamish to mitzvah. And this is also what's brought down Medrash. Hashem told Moshe, to you I will reveal the reason for the Parah Adumah. But to another, it's going to be a statute, it's going to be a decree, it's going to be a super rational law. The idea of Moshe is the idea of Torah. Like it says, Zichru Torah is Moshe Abdi, remember Torah, Moshe, my servant, the Torah is Moshe Gomer, Kilel is called Torah, Kula, the Torah. Moshe includes in it the entire Torah, the Kalmak and still in all. So I should be able to be the purity of that which is very much below. It's not because of the Torah on its own. Only through the level of to you, I am revealing comes down in Moshe and Torah from the Havaya of above. We are drawing this down. Until the level of Hashem's very essence that is higher than Torah. That's how far it comes down to become revealed to Moshe. That's why it says Ani is going on Hashem's very essence. That's also what Shlomo Melch said concerning the mitzvah of Parah Adumah. I said, I will be clever, I will try to understand it, but it was distant from me. I couldn't perceive and understand Parah Adumah. As Chachma heard that Chachma appreciates and realizes this level is distant in regards, in comparison to Chachma. Since it's higher, distant from Chachma, therefore, all he knew was just the level of Chachma alone, didn't know anything more than the fact that, Chachma only knew of its existence, didn't know anything more than its existence, so therefore was trying to reach for it, but could not, and only, there was only a possibility that I thought that I will say, I will be wise, but only it was distant from me. And like by way of a kal v'chomer, by way of how much more so Moshe. Before Hashem told him that to you I'll reveal it, even by Moshe Rabbeinu, who embodied the level of Chachma, his face changed colors. Because it had to come from the Eibishter's very essence to be able to have this type of revelation and to be able to have this type of appreciation, understanding. This is also what's brought down the Medrash. Who will give us Tahir, the pure, from the impure? This capability to transform the Tahir into the Tameh, the impure into the pure, that comes from a level that's called me. Me, we'll soon explain, goes on a very high level. It's like similar to ma. What? Me means who, in other words, beyond comprehension. Similar to what's explained in the Maamar entitled B'Shashek Dimu, Mashukosav, Mi Yitin V'Hoyle Avavim Zacholu. That by Har Sinai, when the Yidden were fearful and they said that Hashem should speak instead, Hashem should not speak, they can't handle it, Moshe Rabbeinu should do the talking. Who will give that their hearts should be that way, that they should have this type of awe of Hashem constantly? So what does that mean? That the me is what will give them this type of awe of Hashem. After Hakol B'dei Shemayim Chutz Miyir Shemayim, though everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven, to B'dei Shemayim B'chinas Hamidas Al Yonis B'chinas Zeir Amti. What's the level of the hands of heaven? Shemayim, heaven, has to do with the supernal midas, what's called Zeir Ampin, because Shemayim is Eish Umayim, as we know, and right away in the beginning of Chumash. Eish is fire, that's the level of Gevura. Mayim, that's water, that's the sphere of Chesed. The combination of that goes on the midas of above, known as Eir Ampin, Havaydo Sata Rishon, the lower Havai, the first Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, when there's twice Havai in a pasuk. Masha'enke, Masha'kos of me, Yitain Koyal Bechinas me, but when it says who will give, it's referring to the level of me, Spheres Habina. It's going on the level of Spheres Habina. Bina is called me because me is the numerical equivalent of 50. There's the 50 gates of Bina. Akelelis is Gimel Rishonis. Bina really includes in it the three first spheres of Chacham Bina Das. The Nikra Yom Hashmini. It's called the 8th day, having to do with this week's parsha. This week's parsha is called Vahibi Yom Hashmini. It's Parsha Shmini. What's the idea of 8? Because when you count the spheres going from bottom up, you have 7 midos, and then the 8th is Bina. The Alma, the Chayru, it's called the world of freedom because we know that by Yovel, in the 50th year, all the slaves go free. Jubilee, all the slaves go free. So the same thing, Bina, which is the level of 50, is about a freedom of all limitations and all types of boundaries and constrictions. The Ajka Lelos B'Sayich Hayelu, Yimanayim B'Yoyser Til Bina includes in it all the highest, most revelations, just like the harp of Mashiach is made up of 8 strands, which also indicates being higher than everything, higher than the 7 regular harp, the 7 cycle of the week, and so on. This level of me, the Bina, and so on, that's the supernal level of Yud Kei Vav Kei. The higher level of Yud Kei Vav Kei we're talking about is the level of the Parah Adumah. That's also the meaning of the me, is the one that transforms and makes the tummy into Torah. From the level of me comes down to be a transformation of the impure to the pure. Till we get to have the greater light that comes when the darkness becomes transformed. According to what we said before, that the root of where Parah Adumah comes down from is from a level that's so much higher, even from Chacham Ilam. It's also be understood why they would sprinkle, both on the Kohen, whose job was to burn up the next Parah Adumah, so they took the ashes of the previous Parah Adumah and sprinkled on him, and also the Kohen Gadol who did the Avodah of Yom Kippurim during his days of separation in preparation for the service. He had a week of separation from anything that he can come into impurity. So these days of separation, he would do in those days. That's when they would make the sprinkling of the ashes of the Parah Adumah through the fact that they would sprinkle upon them initially in the ashes of the Parah. That's root is from the higher level of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Through that, it was their capability to reach afterwards in their service to the level of the root of the Hamshach of the Parah Adumah, and the level of the once in a year, which took place on Yom Kippur. It's explained in Maamar the fact that Parah Adumah is called the Chukas Hatorah is liyosa klolas Hatorah, because it's something that includes the complete and generalities of the entire Torah. Klolas, not Torah mitzvahs uliyas, the general idea of Torah mitzvahs is to be in a way of both drawing to Hashem and returning, moving back and pulling towards Hashem. There's a constant give and take. There's a constant inhale and exhale, a constant pull and a constant moving back. Moikenu in Maisa Parah, so too, it's the actions of the Parah Adumah, the making of the Parah Adumah, Shinyana, Ratzav Yishuv, that idea is also the being pulled towards Hashem returning. This Reifsa Parah Zelbchinas Ratzim Matal Amayla, the burning up of the Parah Adumah, that is going from below to above. Dugmas, that's Ratzi, that's being drawn upwards. Dugmas, that's Reifah Vali, at least the age, similar to the burning up and the ascent to the element of fire, which is when fire burns, it is trying to go upwards to the additional element of fire. Where it says they shall place upon it the spring water, the living water to a vessel. So he's pouring water from above to below. That's the return. That's going from above to below. Like we know the Zelwin Namayim, that's the idea of water. To descend from a high place to a low place. Even more so, Teva, mind who the nature of water is, they descend to a very low place. In other words, water, more than any other thing, earth also falls down. Because water is something that seeks out the lowest place. Earth, if a clod of earth will land, let's say, on a mountain, it will stay wherever it lands. But water will search out the lowest place. So it's understood concerning their root above that they came down from them. That the level of water is of such a type of level that it's about being drawn down very much below. And this living spring water has to be placed in a vessel. What does that indicate? Dafke in a vessel, at least that the drawing down has to be in a way that's settled, in a way of tikkun, not in toyu. In other words, that it's the oiris come down to the kalim, not like the world of toyu where everything was chaos and it broke the vessels. Bechinas shuv in a way that returns and settles. Parah Adumah, that's why the Parah Adumah is called the statute of the Torah. The entire Torah, mitzvahs Parah Adumah in your Ratzav in the mitzvah of Parah Adumah, which is the idea of that pulling and that returning. That by Parah Adumah, the idea of Ratzav Yishuv is in a revealed way. I'm sorry, but in Klali, in a general manner. Through that, it comes down the Ratzav Yishuv, this drawing towards Hashem and pulling back in specifics in all the mitzvahs. Then the Rebbe goes on to say, actually late, I think we'll stop over here. And he says that throughout our avodah, there also has to be this idea of the Ratzav Yishuv, and eventually we should have the idea of we should have the Parah Adumah, which Mashiach is going to make. It's going to be the conclusion of the Golus and the purity of all the impurities of Golus. We should come to the Tahara of the Geula immediately.
Amen.